All right, here we go. In 1969, my parents were ready for a second child. They were unprepared for Colleen. Colleen hit the ground with the force of a tornado. She ran before she crawled. She yowled, sang, laughed, all at full volume, on or off, no middle ground. Righteous always. She was a nasty biter until the day she bit herself in a peak of rage. She somehow got a double dose of personality when she was born, and it couldn't be tamed. She got into everything, crayon doodles on the inside of cupboards all over the house. She was the kid that put everything in her mouth and up her nose. Her fingers were always in the cookie jar. She loved to eat dirt, and after discovering the ocean was salty, two-fisted sand into her mouth all day long. She holds the title of being the only grandchild of 7 to be spanked by our grandmother. She bit the dog on the nose. Grandparents insisted she be leashed while in their care. She was hell on wheels and happy to escape their grasp. She was like a marlin on the end of a fishing line, straining for freedom. When my folks said no or don't, I didn't. But Colleen would roar her indignation. For Christ's sakes, she would yell at me later on, "Why can't you be normal? You're making me look bad." If Dad was watching her, she would spill most of the milk before getting it to her mouth. If she reached for the salt on the table, she did it by knocking over everything in her way with her fist. Her emotions could turn on a dime. She'd be giving you shit one minute and then laughing the next. She loved jokes but couldn't get through telling a really good one without peeing her pants with laughter. Her love had a white-hot intensity that overwhelmed at times. From an early age, she could roar into a room like a hurricane, and you weren't sure if the destruction in her wake was love, mischief, or a stormy mood. She was exciting just to be around. She had a wildness about her. Animals were uneasy around her energy, and she was often nipped. She always wanted long hair, but was doomed to a short crop until high school because of the histrionics when Mom tried to brush her hair. She was Barbies, baby dolls, Mickey Mouse, and everything pink. She was a cuddler and can squeeze people too tight if she was giving out hugs. She broke a couple of Grandma's brittle ribs once. She did too. She loved dainty girl things, and there were sobbing tears if a stranger mistook her for a boy. She was full of joy and found humor in just about everything. We preferred to share a room when we were very young. We always held hands, and we loved to be close. She was tender, thoughtful, smart, and ridiculously funny. The best gift my parents ever brought home. She loved the holidays, and Christmas was most special. She was like Mom, fussing little details and marking each holiday with special traditions. She thought of everything and everyone. No one was ever missed. She grew like a weed. By kindergarten, in the class photo, she looked more like the teacher's aide than the student. Dad would shake his head in wonder at the month-old running shoes that were blown out on the sides, pants ripped, buttons missing. She put her things through a torture test and outgrew clothes quickly. As soon as she hit school, she began growing a large group of friends. Gregarious to her core, everyone was a good friend. She was energized by people around her. We had a hard time knowing who was on the shit list one week and the inner circle the next. It was a web of constantly shifting drama that was better than any TV soap. And you could see the signs early on that she was destined to work with people. We had a favorite aunt in Chilliwack that the folks would use as a babysitter when they flew off for holidays. Auntie Hilda and Colleen got on like a house on fire. Hilda had the same crazy energy that kept you on your toes. They painted nails, sat in the sun, baked cookies and strudel, and Col knew just how to push her buttons. Colleen would hide Hilda's cigarettes. And I don't mean just the pack on the kitchen table. She knew where the big stash was and hid all those too. And Hilda would ask, and then plead, and then demand their return. And Colleen would hold out until Hilda's eyes started to twitch. Ballet, jazz, ice skating. She loved to move so much. We both took lessons, but she had the passion and stuck with it for many years. She was graceful and joyful when she moved. When the dance school did a production of the Nutcracker, the young kids were dressed as small animals. Colleen was a monkey. Measurements for costumes were taken early before the show. They decided to attach the monkey head and ears to the little brown bodysuit. The time in between the measurements and the show time was just enough for Colleen to sprout up a few inches. And it was a disaster. Too late to modify the costume, she had to crouch for the entire show, moving more like a monkey than the rest of the kids. We had a place at North Barrier Lake, a beat-up trailer wedged between the cedar trees. We spent a good part of our summer vacations there, running through the woods, swimming and fishing. Colleen pretended she was a famous cook and would make mud pies for her tea parties, entertaining all of us with a show of some gourmet meal. Like nails on a chalkboard, stirring granite gravel in an enamel bowl makes my teeth itch just thinking about it. The trailer had bunk beds in the back, and I'm not entirely sure why, but Colleen got the top bunk. Many times in the middle of the night, her teddy bear would come rolling off the top onto the floor, the bell inside it tinkling all the way down like an omen. Despite the barrier meant to keep her in, Colleen would follow shortly afterward, rolling in her sleep off the edge of the bunk, and one time she didn't wake up. "Dad, she's coming over the top," I could yell when the bear came by my bunk. Sometimes she hated being the second child. She would demand to be first. And so when Dad, Col, and I were sent out to pick huckleberries off a logging road one day, she demanded to walk first, followed by Dad and then me. And she was first to walk into the wasp nest, first to get stung, and she was first back in the truck. The rest of the lazy days of summer when we were young were spent with the neighborhood kids. She was in and out of their houses all summer, playing Barbies with Raph, getting into trouble with Paulo and Franco next door, sitting in the kitchen with Rosina as she made Italian dishes, or preparing the garden's yield for fall canning. She loved it all. When our folks put the pool in the backyard, our place was the hub of all action, and Col loved it. She loved the water. She swam like a fish and never got cold. She could sit in the pool for hours without a break. The pool was her favorite place, and it continued to be so as she returned home each summer for holidays with the folks. Col was a menace on the golf course. Despite constant warnings to give her a very wide berth on the tee box, she hit at least 3 kids and Dad on different occasions. She once drove her club head further than the ball by at least 100 yards. And in the junior club tournament, where she was required to hit the ball over water, she emptied the ice cream bucket full of balls that the course attendant had on hand as she plopped the balls into the water one by one until she got too close to the edge and slid down the muddy bank on her back into the water. She was a great student, Grades were always well above average, but so were the comments from teachers about chatting in class. She collected some of her dearest friends in the school years: Della, Lisa, Suzanne and Bev, Rory and Raj, the Todds, Colin, so many more. Once you were in the inner circle, you were there until the end, and there was always some stupid shit going down with her friends. On one occasion in high school, her friends had to carry her into the house at 2 a.m., up the stairs and into her room. "It's okay, Mr. Koch," Todd yelled. "We're just putting her to bed." Col and I moved down to Vancouver at the same time. Mom took us down to find an apartment that was close to SFU for Colleen. We shared a place with Rory for a while, and Rory probably remembers this as the loudest part of her life. Colleen had a way of amping up the volume and getting everyone going. After I found a good job and Colleen and Rory finished the year at university, I moved close to work, and Col moved back to Kamloops for the summer and returning to SFU in the fall. Colleen lived in a few different places while attending SFU, and Vanessa was a roommate for a while. Sometimes she lived alone and is always growing her hive of friends all the time. She met Pauline, and they traveled to new places together and enjoyed doing all the cool things that Vancouver had to offer. Colleen left 2 diaries behind covering some of this time in her life. One was her great adventure in Europe with Jane, and another from around the time that she was finishing up her degree and looking for work. Her thoughts were full of her relationships with friends, her joy of experiencing life on her own as an adult, and recurring pangs of homesickness and a yearning to spend more time with me. I remember this time for her as one of great change, many new friends, and she was starting to gain focus in her career. She'd earned her degree in criminology and psychology and was looking for a good start. Lucky for us, she decided to use her superpowers for good. And when she landed her job with the ministry, she was thrilled. It was everything she had talked about wanting. She made more dear friends. Shelley Leary and Michelle came on the scene as good buddies. We had cousins in Vancouver too. Susan and Shelley brought some family goodness to Colleen's Vancouver life, and they sometimes drove home to Kamloops together. By that time, I had returned to Kamloops for school and then a permanent job. This was the time before the internet, and we wrote letters and called after 6. Holidays and summer vacation when she came back to Kamloops were cherished events. One time when she was home, Colleen and I were out for a walk on a windy day. Colleen went to spit her gum, and it got caught in the wind. It came back into my hair. She panicked, and she pushed me down and pulled the handful of hair and the gum from my head, and it happened so fast my head was spinning. And then she started to laugh nervously, and then hysterically, and then she had to run to the nearest restroom. During her first attempt at a driver's license, she drove in the manner of her instructor, our father, arm out the window and honking at pedestrians. The ICBC tester suggested she drive more like her mother on her second go. If you've ever driven with Colleen, you know it often involved threats levied at other drivers. It was scary and embarrassing. One summer, I was driving downtown Kamloops with Colleen in the passenger seat, and a guy started jaywalking right in front of us. I slowed the car. Colleen reached across me and laid on the horn while shouting out the window, "Hey, jackass, get off the fucking road." Then she turned to me and said, "Who does he think he is?" "Pavel," I said. "Pavel who?" she sneered. "Pavel Bure. The Canucks were in town for training. And that weekend she was photobombed by Trevor Linden while out at Tim Stag. Colleen's career hadn't nearly hit its stride until she started with a public guardian and trustee. She became a rock-solid manager. With 30 or more people under her wing, she kept her team on course squashed bullshit the moment she sniffed it in the air, and made sure everyone had fun. Col is famous for her gifts and treats for the holidays and seasons, meticulously crafting and baking surprises for the entire office. And Col made a huge impact across the ministry. She was a fierce advocate for their most vulnerable clients, and she was often in a lead role in projects and programs that benefit people in care, as well as those working in the sector. We are all so proud of her work ethic and her style. Colleen's team held a special Zoom call last fall to celebrate her. There were more than 150 people on the call, and it took an hour to recite all the initiatives she was involved in, as well as her antics as a friend and colleague, and it was an honor to hear it all. One year, in February, we flew down to Arizona to visit the folks. I took a gravel and slept most of the way. While I was asleep, Colleen drank 4 Pepsis and ate all the chocolate the plane had to offer. By the time I woke up over California, the caffeine had her practically levitating off her seat. And then the turbulence started. And then the barfing started. And by the time we landed, she was pretty green from the rough ride and all the crap she'd been eating. When we landed in Phoenix, we stopped at the airport washroom to clean up. Now, I don't have to tell you that Colleen loved collecting shoes. Always snoopy with eagle eyes, she spotted a great pair of shoes on the gal in the next stall. The gal came out and then Colleen came out. She pointed to the shoes. "Did you see those fabulous shoes?" "Colleen, look up, look who's wearing the shoes." It was Brooke Shields. And all Colleen had to say, it was, "Oh my God, great handbag too." Dad booked a vehicle for us to pick up at the airport. The rental guy pointed to a Dodge Caravan. "You're wrong," she said, "that's our ride." Colleen gestured to a Ford Expedition. And as we drove into the RV compound, Colleen made sure to open the windows and turn up one of her favorite songs so that it boomed for all to hear. And Dad stood shaking his head in defeat as we pulled onto their lane. We traveled around Arizona with the folks for 10 days. We drove from the Grand Canyon to Mexico, and it was our last family vacation together. One afternoon, Colleen and I were sitting by a pool at the hotel watching people swim. "Why do people wear brown bathing suits? I don't get it," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked. She said, "You look like a big turd floating in the pool." And then she howled with laughter. I have to admit, I've envied the way she gathered friends over the years. There are so many folks from school that she's been with forever. The ones from university, more from work, friends she's made through other friends, so many adventures together. She was there for your weddings, babies, bad breakups, celebrations, generally bringing the joy to any party. It seems I have 100 photos of Colleen with babies. She had a way with kids. They loved her. The crazy energy she had was like the Pied Piper. Kids just got her, and she doled out the love and teasing with great joy. HC and Kyle's lives, and she inserted herself into HC and Kyle's lives with a seriousness that was masked by the fun she made sure they have together. Colleen loved tennis. She played a bit when she was young and was an avid fan of the pros. She loved Serena Williams, Sampras, and of course her Roger. When Serena played her big sister Venus and won, Colleen would cheer extra hard, delighting in the little sister coming out on top. Colleen and I went to Montreal to see the men's tennis tournament for her 40th birthday. I told her the heat and humidity would be really intense in August. She said, "I'm from Vancouver, I know humidity." Once we got there and the humidex was 32 degrees at 7:30 in the morning, she conceded the heat was next level. We crammed ourselves into hot aluminum seats for almost 2 weeks. And despite the discomfort and heat stroke, she loved the trip and almost forgave her favorite player, Roger Federer, for double faulting out of the tournament. Colleen had issues with taxidermy. It really wigged her out. She wouldn't go into a room if something stuffed and glassy-eyed was on the wall. When we were at elementary school basketball, at a basketball game, I got hit in the nose and eyes and I couldn't see, and had to be guided to a classroom to get enough paper towel to stop the bleeding. Colleen led the way and was eager to make me better. The class had a stuffed bear cub inside the door, and Colleen took one look and turned tail out of there very fast, abandoning me to whatever fate the little bear posed. In Montreal, we made reservations at a much talked about restaurant, and I could hear Colleen gasp as we crossed the threshold and looked up at the 20-foot ceilings ringed by dozens of stuffed animal heads. Oh shit. And she would go no further. But there was no way I was missing the chance to eat at this restaurant, so we negotiated a little table in the entrance where you pick up your mitts and check your coat. And from then on, I was sent into a restaurant to scout the wildlife before we took a seat. She was the best at shopping. She could pick out the perfect gift for anybody, right size, right color, something you might not even look at yourself in the store, but she just knew it was right for you. It was a little harder sometimes when she was shopping for herself. One time she was in the change room at the store and she bellowed at me to come to help. She had on a chocolate-covered puffy jacket. "Is it like the swimsuit?" she said. "Damn it," she said, "do I look like a big turd in a snowbank?" When Cole got sick, everything changed. For a while, the joy disappeared. Her ache for my parents was visceral. It was a constant yearning in her, and she carried the loss with her daily. It was always close to the surface. When she became sick, it increased with intensity. She longed for them. I tried to be parent and sister in one package. She needed me so much when she got sick. ICU, isolation. I had to be her voice for a while. While she was in hospital, I found her the most lovely apartment that suited her changing needs. She viewed it on FaceTime, and we managed her renovations on FaceTime too. She loved it so much. Her view from every window was onto a green space with huge cedars and maple trees, a peaceful scene to gaze from her bed as she convalesced. If there is one good thing to come out of Colleen's illness, it is the amount of time I spent with her over her final 5 years. It wasn't always a great time, but we took it for what it was. We connected with a closeness that was stronger than ever before. One time at Burnaby Hospital, they gave a special admission to the palliative care garden. Call hadn't been outside for several months, and it was spring. We sat there, and she moved around in the wheelchair looking at the memory rocks painted by families. It was a lovely, sunny, warm day, and she looked at me and she said, "I'm getting out of here." It became her mantra to get better, beat the odds, and get back to life. Call had a 40% chance of surviving her initial hospital stay in ICU. It was terrifying, and I learned more than I wanted to about being helpless in a situation. It took almost a year for them to decide to remove the kidney, and that's when they discovered the tuberculosis. Most of her medical team had never seen renal TB. It is so rare. She became a unicorn, celebrated by the medical students who would gather around her on rounds while she walked them through her journey. Call became so knowledgeable about her disease that she was asked to speak to other renal patients. She was pleased to be useful and find some purpose in her situation. She brilliantly managed her care the way she managed everything else, with precision and detailed organization. You can imagine the size of her medical records after a couple years in. It was astonishing. And when a new doctor would come onto the team, they would say, "Give me a few minutes to review your chart." And Col would say, "See you after lunch." If I said she suffered a lot, I would be understating Colleen's daily existence. Kidney, bladder, hips, knees. It never let up, and sometimes it was all at once. Early on, Colleen told me not to jump up every time she squawked. "For Christ's sake, sit down. When I need you, I'll call you." So when people were visiting for the first time and Colleen was crying out from the other room, I would keep talking as if nothing was going on. And the visitors' eyes would go wide and they would fidget a bit, unsure if they should go help, and a little alarmed that I wasn't. "Make no mistake," I said. "You'll know when she needs help." Once she got settled with her home dialysis and back to work, things really started looking up. Dialysis exhausted her, and she still couldn't sleep more than an hour at a time with the pain, but she was going harder than ever. Being back to work was the best thing. She missed her people dearly. She loved the challenge of work. She got very good at zooming around in her walker and figuring out how to do what was needed. Independent always. We had a couple of really good years, a routine of visits back and forth. We had the best Christmas ever in 2019. She was getting out with friends a bit, but not as much as she wanted to. But her joy for life was back. She was cooking up a storm in her kitchen. She was a really good cook and loved collecting recipes. She tried an Italian recipe that called for baked eggplant. She put the whole eggplant on the pan and put it in the oven. And 20 minutes later, boom, it exploded and blew the door open. And she shared the carnage on FaceTime. And while we laughed, she learned to turn on the self-cleaning oven. She still found humor in her situation, even in the most difficult times. Once, while making tomato soup for dinner, she fell in the kitchen and couldn't get up. The ambulance was called to help. They assessed her and she seemed okay, but where was all the blood coming from? Col started to laugh so hard that they had to take an extra minute before getting her up. The tomato soup was all over the floor and walls like the aftermath of a mob gunfight. Her 50th birthday was so lovely. Brad and I worked hard to get the party organized. She got to show off her new condo and celebrate with her friends. The photo of her with the crazy pink glasses was that weekend, while she was dropping us at the airport. And after she tried them on, I knew they had to be hers. Did you know that a live donor came forward? An anonymous donor was in the works when we were first notified in October 2021. We were scheduled to do the matching tests in November, but by then everything had gone horribly wrong and she was back in the hospital for the last time. If you are here, dear donor, thank you for giving us hope. There are a few friends who went above and beyond in her last few years. Like it or not, Eric, she thought of you as a brother-in-law. She called on him often to help with practical things, her personal handyman. Rory and Eric took her in for the holidays when she couldn't come home. And you couldn't keep Colleen away from her HC. She adored the girl from the very first. Colleen and Rory could really talk about stuff, and they always had a ton of fun. And they were really good at crying together. Like all of her closest friends, they are family. Todd Williams stayed with her while working in Vancouver for a few months, and she loved it. I would FaceTime them at dinner time, and they were always laughing in the kitchen. Todd was always there for her. When she couldn't drive home for Christmas, Todd would go down and pick her up. He took me down when she went into the hospital the last time. He was there when she went into COVID. When the staff asked him if he wanted to stay away, he said no way. He was there for her no matter what, and we spent the day with her in isolation before she was moved to the COVID ward. She told me that I could trust Todd like a brother, and I've leaned on him in the wake of her death. Todd, Rena, and Kyle couldn't be here today. Rena's mother is getting married this afternoon. Rena's mom told Colleen about the engagement before she told anyone else, and so Colleen is attending the wedding as a special guest in the little early. Shelley, Manjeet, Pep, Pauline, Bryce. These people braved the pandemic and went to the hospital in the middle of the night, brought her Christmas dinner, real food and junky favorites, brought her fresh laundry and just sat with her through the darkest times. I can't imagine what it would have been like without these good souls. Suzanne has known Colleen since the first day of school. Their friendship has always been very strong, full of fun and adventure, boating trips across the line, vacations, movies, and oh my God, shopping. They could do anything together. Col has counseled Suzanne through some tough times, and Suzanne literally saved Colleen's life with her decision to take Col into Emerge for the first time in 2016. And she was there through it all, running Col back to the hospital countless times, calling the firemen to pack her out of the 2-story walk-up on Smith. She took an active role as a pharmacist in advising and researching the buckets of medication she was on. We counted on her so much through it all. We never had to ask twice. She just dropped everything and came to Col's side. Their passion for shoes lives on. As they wore the same size, and Suzanne was able to take over Colleen's huge collection. Col asked me to look out for Suzanne, and I do what I can gladly. In her last weeks, she talked about the things still left to do. Some were grand, like vacations back to Europe, and others were small, like baking bread. And she debated the merits of pairing peanut butter with cheddar, laughing at herself in the way that she did. And she worried most about leaving me alone. She hung on to her life with the same force that was there with her from the start. But then, it was just all too much, and it was time to gently go. What a gift to have some time between her death and this party. Time to reflect and explore family albums and her collections. A chance to remember who she was with the shadow of the horrific illness beginning to fade. There was a time in the fall when I had a hard time remembering parts of our life, blanks in my life and my memory of her. It's all coming back now, and I'm grateful for the memories that appear every day. She is always on my mind. And I know others hear her voice over their shoulder too, laughing with you, telling you not to be a silly ass. And for Bradley, she's cackling maniacally and yelling, "Brush your fucking dog." In a way, I have lost half my memory. She was the other keeper of our family, we four. The wild, loud, crazy side. The memories of stupid shit going down. She remembered the fun and the laughter. She was the fun and laughter. And I love her. And I miss all of her every minute of every day. Thank you.